Today we will be talking about The Cheese and the Worms by Carlo Ginzburg. This is a microhistory during the 16th century. Domenico Scandella, who is known as Minocchio, had many different views about the church during the 16th century. Him rebelling and obtaining a lot of knowledge from books he had read throughout his lifetime helped him form into a strong-minded individual. Minocchio was a miller from Montreal, Italy, who was tried by the Inquisition. His actions and what he said led him to get burnt alive. Minocchio lived most of his life in Montreal. He learned to read, and his religious views changed a lot due to the knowledge he was obtaining.
He was tried of heresy in 1583 and adjured his statements in 1584, but was in prison for 20 months. These events had led up to Minocchio becoming in trouble with the church. All started with the books he had read and the knowledge he came across that made him challenge the church. Minocchio had a huge advantage because many people did not read at all during this time in the 16th century. Some books that Minocchio read were Iliad for Bella Biba, Historia del Gisio, and many others that had influenced him. During his trial, he argued that only sin was to harm one's neighbor. He also pointed out that many men have been born to the world, but not of a virgin mother, and therefore he concluded that Saint Joseph was the dad of Jesus. His views contradicted many of the church's beliefs and teachings. This made the Inquisition really mad, but Minocchio was not going to change his mind on the different things the church was teaching. The church being in control of many of the aspects of life during the 16th century made many people not want to rebel because they feared for their lives. The church was always right no matter what. Minocchio spoke freely because he felt that he did nothing wrong. In his hearing, he explained his cosmology about the cheese and the worms and how angels emerged from it. Minocchio said, "I have said that in my opinion, all chaos, that is earth, air, water, and fire, were mixed together and out of the bulk of the mass formed. Just the cheese is made out of milk, and the worms appeared in it, and these were the angels. The holy majesty decreased from these should be God and the angels, and among that number of angels that were also God, he too, having been created out of the mass, and at the same time, he was named Lord with 4 captions, Lucifer, Michael, Gabriel, and Raphael. That Lucifer sought to make himself Lord equal to the king, who was the majesty of God. And for this arrogance, God ordered him driven out of heaven with all the hosts and his company. And this God later created Adam and Eve and the people in great numbers to take the places of the angels who had expelled. And this, as the multitude did not follow God's commandments, he sent his son, whom Jesus sees, and he was crucified. Minocchio was warned because he denounced because of the ways and beliefs he had of the church, both by the church and by his family. Minocchio returned to his town and wasn't able to speak about his inspirations, meaning that the different books he read. He ended up being burnt alive for his different views in the church. He was a strong believer of the different things he had read, and nothing would change his mind because he's seen a new world. He's in a new side of the world through the readings.
Heresy is a belief or theory that strongly establishes beliefs or customs. This usually is in violations of religious teachings, but also strong views or principles that oppose the importance of God in any religion. During the 16th century, it was not okay to rebel against the church or think differently about the church. Challenging the church or making any new ideas about anything new was not allowed. The church had all the power and was always right no matter what. Going against the church could be so extreme that it ended in getting killed, just like in Minocchio's case. Everything began to change once the Renaissance happened. People started to shy away from the Catholic Church and embrace themselves with their different views and beliefs. Exploration of new places, just like Christopher Columbus, revealed many new places which people were unaware of. Education got better and cultures were changing. The 16th century was hard to understand the way the church was organized and the different teachings. Many individuals were stepping out against the church, just like Minocchio in many years before and also after. Reform was something that was going to happen. Martin Luther was a young priest from Germany who found in the Bible that the Roman Catholic Church was messing up the practice by selling people their forgiveness through indulgences. The Roman Catholic Church authorities were mad. He was put on trial for heresy, but he escaped his sentence. Luther wrote an essay about how the church needs to reform within itself. He wanted the church to be a place where people were touched by God. He did not want the church to be people controlling other people to believe in God. These were a huge split between churches in the West. There were new Protestant churches that broke away from the Catholic churches. This division was persistent for over 500 years. Once the Reformation happened, there was many other European countries that the Reformation had taken place in. The Reformation had led many Christian groups to recreate the life of the church. There were many communities that looked for the Holy Spirit of God to communicate with them directly rather than seeking God with their intellect. The Reformation was a huge step for many people because no one ever challenged the church. The church was known to have all the power, and you did not question it. The Reformation was a huge movement that helped many people stray away from the corruption that the church was presenting.
What does this all mean? People rebelling against the church was a huge thing. No one ever dared to do so because of their fear in the church. Once people started to get more educated and actually understanding what was going on in the world, many views decided to shift. The church wanted people to be ignorant to the world because they wanted to hold all power. The Reformation and Montesquieu rebelled against the church made the church really mad because they started to lose control. The church losing control of the people was not ideal for them. They wanted to hold all power no matter what they had to do. The Reformation was a huge movement because it was something that never happened before. The Renaissance was something that really impacted history in many ways. The word Renaissance means rebirth or reawakening. Europe definitely had a rebirth after the Reformation. The Renaissance led people to explore and examine many different ways of life through art and many different things that they were presented. Because the people had many new ideas and views they had never had today. This was a huge change around the world that might not have been so bad. People were getting educated and seeing different sides to the world that they'd never seen before.
Pinocchio's story is very complex and very interesting. His story teaches us many different things that we can examine. His story teaches us about faith by him reading many different books and understanding the different sides of religions. His different books helped him shape and understand many different views he never seen before. He believed that you need to take care of your neighbors and treat them right and do no wrong by them. His faith did shine through because he would not step down to the Inquisitor because he had different views on the church than they did. He shows his true colors throughout the entire book also. Pinocchio had his different views and did not back down to the church. He was very stubborn, and his views were right, and no one could change that. When writing his letter to the Inquisitor that they made him write, it was definitely not what the Inquisitor expected from him. Pinocchio held his stance through the entire letter and did not care. His views shined through no matter what the cost. He felt like he had to share his views. No matter the consequences, he did not step down. He had everything to lose but did not care. Pinocchio showed that he did not really care what the Inquisitor or the church had to say. Yes, they were the authority, but no matter what they did, that did not change his different beliefs. He still rebelled and did his own thing. Authority did not seem to bother Pinocchio because he still read. This action and the things he says throughout the book really shows that he is not going to change his views because that was normal to society in the 16th century.
New aspects and established ideas are going to be overthrown. Long-established church ideas and traditions prevailed over new establishments and ideas. I think that Pinocchio's story definitely does resonate with the world today. There are many things that people do to rebel and express how they feel. There are many different things happening in the world that show rebellion and different sides of society. There are many events such as protests against many things such as same-sex marriages, women's rights, and even against the president. People throughout the years have made many different changes that people before never did. People are more vocal, whether it be on social media, during a speech, or even an event on TV. The world today is very different than it was before, and there are some countries who have communism or even rulers who are very strict, such as China, but people will always find a way to rebel against the higher power, no matter the cost, if they do not agree with the different things going on. All in all, Pinocchio's opposing views about Catholicism shine through the entire book, leading to his death. Different laws and variety of beliefs and religious customs had badly troubled Pinocchio. His mental universe expanded enormously. Pinocchio started to believe in many things than before. He started to question whether his beliefs were true because he was exposed to many different ideas he had never came across before. Just like Pinocchio, who wanted to question the church, the Cathars were considered opposing to the church. The Cathars were a religious group during the 11th century in Europe, and they started to believe that the church was very corrupt. Cathars believed that they had a distorted vision of Catholicism. Pinocchio got questioned by the Inquisitor and was questioned when he got his beliefs from. He stated that he had his beliefs out of his own head. Monocchio kept insisting that his own beliefs coming out of his own head had nothing to influence him. The Inquisitor is not too pleased with his response since he knows Monocchio was lying. His beliefs oppose the church in many ways. His beliefs help to further fuel the fire towards his rebellion. All in all, Monocchio had a very interesting and amazing story that touched many people to years to come. Without his hard work and dedication to his beliefs, he would not have gotten his point across.
Now time for some questions. Do you think that Monocchio did the right thing?
I absolutely think that Monocchio did the right thing for the simple fact that he stood up for what he believed in. I think that he had many ideas that he wanted to spread and share, but he was nervous at first. But once he wrote the letter to the Inquisition, I think that everything came full force, and he was kind of like, you know what, I'm going to say what I believe and stand with it and not be scared of anybody because the new idea is being across. How about you? Do you think that?
Yes, I also think that Monocchio did the right thing because he never gave up on his beliefs, no matter how crazy and absurd they were. Those were his beliefs, and whether the church believed in them or not, he never backed down and ended up giving his life in the end. Do you think that Monocchio was justified in his doings?
I think that Monocchio was justified in his doings for the simple fact that he never back down to the church, and especially the Inquisitor. Yes, it might have been really tough for him to spread his different ideas that he came about in the different books that he read, such as the Quran, but I feel like he did it in a very smart way because he was educated on many of the things that he was talking about. He just didn't come out and was crazy about it. Yes, he might have been crazy, seen by many different people, but he spoke very intelligently, and I think he was justified, even though he knew he was going to die in the end.
Do you think that the church still has the same structure as before? Personally, I do believe that the church still has the same structure as before because obeying by the Catholic Church will mean that you have to obey by very traditional rules that are very strict to the guidelines, considering the 10 Commandments, which do still apply back in the 15th century as well.
I still think that the church does have many similar structures from before and after the Reformation. I feel like the church kind of lost somewhat of control because not a lot of people are following the church rules, but we do have some extreme Catholics that still do follow rules. There are many different things, such as paying for the church. There's a lot of traditional things. Just at the end of every single church session, you have to give money and different things to help support the church. I feel like the church still is a huge and very important factor in many people's lives. Monocchio needed to spread his ideas across, and without these ideas, he might not have had an impact on people around him, and even the church. The church freaking out about him and his beliefs really did make a huge impact on many people around him and many people reading his story today. Machiccio thought he was smarter than the Inquisitions, and his single purpose was to go against the church and all the ideas. He learns about forgiveness and sees that there is a lot of importance to the forgiveness, and your sins are going to happen. Sins are going to happen, but there's always going to be forgiveness. In the 16th century, invention of the printing press happens. More people are reading and becoming educated. Printing press helped with rebellion because people are getting educated, and it doesn't follow what the church is saying or what the church does. Monocchio, he believed in hell. He believed that hell was all made up and there was no hell, which also went against the Catholic Church. All in all, Monocchio had a lot of things that influenced him throughout the 16th century. Without his many views of the church and his different things that he spoke about during the Inquisition, he would not have made his points across.
Overall, Monocchio was a brave individual for expressing his strong beliefs against the Catholic Church. Thank you for listening to today's podcast about The Cheese and the Worms by Carlo Ginzburg. Without this microhistory, we may have never had the major impact on beliefs through the little people on their From this microhistory, we have been introduced to the influence that the Little People had, such as Minocchio, against the Catholic Church, and how that is still influenced